Welcome to the Baby Playbook podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm your host, Nicolina Kowevska-Karufe. It's always such a pleasure to log in and to talk to you and to share information about, of course, this podcast is all about, pregnancy, getting ready for a baby, and also that first 6 months of having a baby, and just how crucial it is to get as much information as you can ahead of time to really prepare yourself, because it is a bit of a whirlwind adventure once it comes your way. I'm really excited for today's episode, and it's a very timely episode as well, because this Thursday is Red Nose Day 2025. Of course, you can help Red Nose Australia to continue to save little lives by buying a red nose via rednoseday.org.au. And we have a really special episode today where we're going to be focusing in on, safe sleeping and safe practices when it comes to babies during that first 6 months, which is really crucial for parents to be aware of, how they can provide a safe environment for their baby, how they can engage in safe practices as well. And Red Nose does an amazing job at educating parents in this space. So if you hop on their website, rednoseday.org.au, they actually have so many resources, articles, things that you can read, tips, and even on their socials as well, where you can follow and just really equip yourself with some of the crucial information that you need for those first 6 months. And we have a really special guest today. Dr. Nelu Simonsz is a pediatric doctor, so she knows all about babies. She knows all about this first 6 months, and she is also a parent herself. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
We have so much to get through today, and we're really going to be honing in on that first 6 months and kind of, I guess, like the GP doctor side of having a baby, because I'm sure you would know as well, doctor, that during pregnancy there's like a lot of appointments and there's a lot of focus on like the medical side of things and birth, and I feel like once the baby comes along, everything's really in your court when it comes to keeping up with the medical side of things, right? Like the proper checkups at the proper time and the developmental milestones, and there's quite a bit to get through during that stage, isn't that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I have to preface this by saying I've been doing pediatrics for 15 years. I've been working as a pediatrician for a while now, and I still really struggled when I had my first and then my twins. Like it's really hard. You've got this thing that comes home with you that you have to keep alive and nurture and grow, and they don't come with a textbook. So I just acknowledging that it is really hard for everyone. I think even if you do have the medical knowledge, it is challenging. So yeah, I agree. I think the first 6 months are it's a whirlwind. It's a steep learning curve. Every baby is different, and it's a time where there's a lot of well-meaning, well-intentioned advice from all different avenues, whether it be, your mother-in-law or your sister or a friend or social media or your nurse or your doctor or everyone. And I think that's actually what the most confusing thing is, that there's so much information out there. So I'm really grateful for podcasts like this that kind of hone in on the really important things, but also, my big thing is you have to do what works for you. You're going to get a lot of advice, and a lot of this time is about smiling and nodding and just doing what is safe and what works for you and your family unit.
100%. And yes, we all feel that kind of like wave of advice that comes in. I think it even starts like when you're in the hospital and, when you get the nurses changing shifts and you ask a question to like the same question to the different nurse, and you get a completely different answer, and you're like, wait, what? So it starts from the beginning. It's very confusing.
Absolutely. It's so confusing.
Okay, so talk us through, let's first talk about that checkup guide for babies in the first 6 months. Logistically, there are kind of like these week milestones that you need to hit, and you need to go and get a checkup from a GP or a pediatric doctor, of course. How often, and what does each checkup involve?
Yeah, look, I can speak to Victoria, but I assume it's similar elsewhere. But actually, the majority of the checkups are done by maternal child health nurses or equivalent, and they are sort of essentially set in stone to try and capture everyone, to make sure that there is a place to go and a place for a checkup and a place for a check-in. They're not meant to be a burden. They're meant to be a really good touch point, really, and a good escalation point. So I get a lot of referrals from maternal child health nurses who are worried about babies for whatever reason. So it's a really good way to escalate concerns. Generally, there's one pretty soon after birth, and if you're lucky enough, most of them happen in the home, which is fantastic and a really important part of safety checks and safe sleeping and everything that we'll talk about. And then the general pattern here in Victoria is 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, and 4 months. And then in between, there's often GP reviews as well. So we often say a GP check at 6 weeks, which coincides with 6-week immunizations, and then again at 6 months, which also coincides with immunizations. So, the setup in the system is that hopefully there's enough checkpoints there for families very clustered together. It seems like a lot at the start, but that's when they need the most support. And then it sort of stretches out as you settle into a bit of a groove.
I'd love to know kind of, because of course they're set at different times for, as you said, for one reason is to keep them close together so that there's consistent checks. But I assume also there's a reason behind them. For example, the 6-week checkup is also coincides with immunization. So give us a broader picture of kind of like what each checkup involves.
Yeah, so I think across the board, all the checkups look at the health of baby and the mental health of mum. And the family unit. So that's something that is discussed at every single checkpoint. So if we're talking about baby, some of the common things are looking at their feeding and their weight. And I know that some mums and parents feel really stressed about the focus on weight, but I think it is important to track that, and it's important because that can sometimes be the first marker that something is awry. Whether it be sort of maybe mum's not coping at home with feeding, or is there something going on with bubs. So that it is really important to keep a track on the weight, and those early days the weight is quite important. So in terms of the medical side, it's really looking at the weight of bub. How is bub presenting? I occasionally will have a baby who's come in with a hip that feels a bit clicky, or some heavy breathing, or just is there anything sort of medically going on with baby that the nurse has been able to pick up? And remembering these nurses see a lot of babies, so they know what normal and well looks like. And so I think they're a really good marker for when something is a little bit off. So that's the main thing from the medical perspective. And then also looking at development. So at every single checkpoint, we're looking at development. And I think we're going to talk about this a bit later. It's really just to make sure that we're on track. There isn't a sort of, a tick box, your baby must be doing this at exactly this time. And if you look through your books, you'll see that often it's more if they're not doing it by this time, we need to have a bit of a think. It's not generally not it's not a way to make sure that something is right or wrong, because there is such a big spectrum of what is normal for babies. But again, it's just about a bit of a checkpoint. We don't want these babies slipping through the cracks. So that's sort of the medical side. And then there's a lot of focus on safety. So the main focus, especially early on, is safe sleep. Because as we know through some of the amazing work that Red Nose has done, that safe sleep is absolutely crucial, and that unfortunately babies die from poor sleeping habits or from unfortunately from preventable things. So this is a really big focus of the maternal child health visits. And then they also look at safety in the home. So the first visit, a lot of that is about looking at the home and the home environment, making sure that it is safe for a newborn baby. Car safety when you're out and about. So lots of really practical things that you might not think about. And then safety for the mum. So there's a lot of questions around parental safety. Is the mum feeling safe at home? Are there concerns for domestic violence? And then, of course, maternal mental health. We know that postnatal depression is real. It's a big deal. It can impact families. It can impact mums. It can impact babies. And so the maternal child health nurses are really well versed in how to look for that in mums, as are the GPs and the paediatricians if they need to see them. So they're the main focuses, and also just giving the family a sense of support, someone that they can turn to, someone that they can ask, is this normal? Is this not? And then linking them in with the mothers groups and the other family groups in the community as well. So it seems like a quick appointment, but there's a lot to get through, and there's a lot of agenda behind it to look after baby and the mum and the family unit.
Yeah. And it's so thorough, these checks as well. And I really love that you've mentioned as well that, mum health and that development and parent safety as well, because we did do a great episode on this as well with Dr. Kavya early in the podcast, which I'll link in our show notes, just talking about also how important it is to have those checkups for yourself as well, because I'm sure you can relate as well, Doctor, like everything, all this focus is on the baby, which is of course so important. And, this is your new life and your new responsibility. But we tend to just like automatically forget that, like, we've just gone through a huge medical, birth event, and we're probably not eating well, we're probably not drinking enough water, all those little things. Mentally there's a lot of like health, mental health challenges in that time. So that's also really important, that it's not just about baby, it is also about parents, because your baby can only thrive when parents are thriving as well, right?
Absolutely. I'm really glad you said that. Yeah, happy mum, happy baby. Like, I used to do an unsettled baby clinic. Unfortunately, I don't have time to do it anymore. I loved it. But a lot of what I did was giving mums permission to go for a walk, or to leave the baby with another family member and go and get the nails done. Just really simple things that are really important for maternal mental health. So yeah, absolutely crucial part of these visits.
Okay. Well, let's move a little bit more into the developmental milestones that you mentioned before. This can be a real source of like anxiety for parents. We've all been through it. And, there's the things that like we always speak about, which is like, oh my gosh, my baby's not rolling yet, or oh my gosh, my baby's not crawling yet. And like, you go to your mother's group and like all the babies are crawling and you're like, wait, is something, we can just really overthink that and get into a spiral. Talk us through developmental milestones. You mentioned a little bit before that they are just guides, and they're just markers. So that's really good to know. What else do we need to know about these?
Yeah, so I think the first thing to say is, if you Google developmental milestones, you will get these exact, by this age you need to be doing this, by this age you need to be doing that. But the reality is it's a range. Okay, so some kids will walk at 9 months, some kids won't walk till 2. And that's just the way it is. There's no way to predict it. And everything is on a bit of a bell curve. So that what I mean by that is the majority of kids are going to be sitting here, but there's always going to be babies at one end and babies at the other end, and you don't know where your child's going to sit. But the majority of kids do things around a similar age. So when you are in a mother's group where all babies are crawling and yours isn't, it is really stressful to think, what is wrong with my baby? I think the key is to remember, first of all, there is a range, there is a bell curve, and someone has to be at one end of the bell curve and someone has to be at the other. I tell families this all the time. My twinnies are tiny, off the chart tiny. But someone has to be off the chart. Like, we can't all be the same. So it's the same with development. So I think it's trying to block out the noise about that. But also we do pick up things that are wrong with kids when they have delayed development. So I'm absolutely not saying to minimize it, that it's completely normal, but I think the absolute majority are within a normal range. So I think just being aware of that. But also, if you have a gut instinct that something is wrong, I think it is really important to escalate that. And so we do occasionally see people who are kind of like, brushing things off, but the family feel like something's not right. And then I think it is absolutely worth chatting to maternal child health nurse, GP, trying to get into a PED, really advocating for your child because you know them the best. In terms of red flags, I guess for us, from a medical sense, it's if there's multiple areas that are delayed. So, a child might be taking a while to crawl, but they're babbling and they're smiling and they're trying to sit up. But there might just be one area that they're just a bit delayed in. And in that sense, kids are developing so much, their brains are growing so quickly, they can't do everything at once. And often if they suddenly learn how to babble, then maybe their gross motor slows down a little bit, and that's okay. But if everything is a little bit delayed, sometimes that can be a bit of a flag for, is there anything else going on? So I think it's, once you've got a couple of areas that you're a bit concerned about, or the big thing is sort of going backwards. So, when kids are sick, they might stop, say they were pulling to stand, they might get a bit sick and then stop pulling to stand. But if they're consistently regressing, that's a bit more of a concern as well. So, they were sick and they couldn't stand, but now they can't even roll, and now they're not really even sort of doing tummy time. So they're sort of really going backwards. I think that is also a red flag. So, and weight. And I know that everyone feels like there is a lot of focus on weight, but I think, kids who don't grow, who are being fed appropriately, is also a bit of a red flag, particularly with developmental stuff. So look, I think it's just, when I say red flag, I mean it's something that you should just speak to someone about. But for me, it's maternal parental intuition. So if you're feeling like something's not right, definitely sort of get further advice, or if you've got any of those things, so multiple domains or going backwards if you like, and consistently going backwards. But you know, the key is there is a range, and you don't have to be doing what every other child in the room is doing. You don't even have to. They don't even have to develop the same that the sibling did. So we often see families saying, "Well, my first at this age was doing this, and now this child's not." Every child is different. Every child's different. Every family is different. The circumstances are different. You know, my first, she took 3 steps at 13 months and then didn't walk again until 16 months. And she had no intention of walking. Life was too cruisy. Whereas my twins, they were 3 months prem, but they were up and about earlier than she was because they had a big sister to run after. So, you know, your life circumstances are different. A lot of people focus on development with their first child because they've got more time and they are doing the reading and the cards and all the activities. And then by the time you have your second or your third, they just kind of have to get on with it. So, you know, you have
Fend
to
for themselves.
yeah. So, you know, be kind to yourself, understand about the situation, circumstances change. Not every child's going to be the same, but this is why we've got these checkpoints, these maternal child health nurse, GP checkpoints, where if something is slipping through the cracks, it's a good opportunity to pick it up, and it gives families a chance to flag that they are worried.
Yeah, definitely. And to trust that instinct as well. We hear a lot about that. Because I think it's better safe than sorry, right? Just book in that checkup, just get it checked up. I think the other thing to note as well is that these sorts of appointments would give you the opportunity to kind of ask for advice on how you can motivate baby maybe to do a bit of a roll, or to, you know, maybe it's just a simple thing of, you know, perhaps like leave them a little bit longer during tummy time or whatever it may be. I'm not the medical one taking advice, but you can then just get those tips on how to work towards that milestone. And then also, I think, you know, you'd agree, doctor, is that like there's no such thing as a stupid question when you go to these appointments.
Absolutely. I mean, what's the point if you can't ask your questions?
Right. Yeah. And I think it's, you know, it's interesting because once you become a parent, all of a sudden it's like all these job titles are like given to you. It's like you need to become a breastfeeding expert, and then you need to become a medical expert, and you need to become a sleep expert. Like it's all these things that you're way unqualified for. And one of those things is the medical side for a lot of us. And you even said, as somebody in this space as well, it's also really hard when it's your own child to keep on top of things. So, and not to feel at all embarrassed or ashamed or whatever it is, just get in there and utilize this appointment to ask every single question that has popped up in your mind for the last couple of weeks.
And I would much rather you do that than jump on Google and see all the rubbish that's out there, because you could literally put anything into it and you would find a horror story that will just keep you up at night. So yes, please use these appointments and the health professionals to support you. I mean, I'm not saying that speaking to other mums isn't helpful, because it really is. It's really good to sort of validate and have, you know, solidarity when you're really struggling. But if you're asking for advice, just be cautious about information that's out there, and you know, influencers that are spruiking all sorts of random things that are not evidence-based.
Definitely. Yeah. In this world that we live in. Let's move on to safe sleep practices, which is an area that Red Nose really focuses in on. And that's, you know, really why Red Nose Day was created, to make sure that we are raising money for research in this area and SIDS. And a big part of that is equipping ourselves with the information to make sure that our babies are sleeping in a safe environment. Give us a bit of a rundown on 0 to 6 months, when you bring your baby home, what a safe sleeping environment looks like, and what we should really be focusing in on when we even, you know, for example, we might be pregnant and just setting things up and buying things at this point. So give us some advice in that area.
Yeah. So I guess the first thing to say is that a lot of this is all evidence-based. It's all research-based. Rates of infant and neonatal deaths have dramatically improved since these practices have come in. So this isn't just woo. This is you know, real life evidence-based, saving babies' lives. That's the first thing to say. The second thing is the Red Nose website is amazing. I use it a lot. I used it a lot before I had kids, and then I used it a lot when I had kids. Like my child is now rolling and can't roll back overnight. What do I do? There's literally a fact sheet for anything on there. So I guess when we're talking about safe sleep, really what we want to avoid is that a baby their face being covered and their airway being covered. Okay, suffocation essentially. I'm just going to just say it as it is. So we're really trying to avoid a baby being suffocated, because babies can't move enough to get themselves out of that situation. Okay, so if your 2-year-old is lying flat on their face on a pillow, they've got the strength to be able to roll over and sort of clear their airway and be able to breathe, whereas a new baby can't. And so that's essentially what we're trying to avoid. One of my huge bugbears about when you're pregnant and preparing to bring a baby home is that you look at all these beautiful catalogs and they all have, soft toys in the cots and all these gorgeous linen and blankets and everything. You look at I won't say a brand, but you look at a catalogue and that's all you see. And so families think that's how I need to set up my nursery, with all these gorgeous soft toys and blankets and sheets and these beautiful drapes and all this stuff. But really what you need absolutely nothing in the cot. So the first thing about safe sleep is that, you can't have toys, sheets, anything that's going to sort of potentially go onto baby's face. Really important. So sleeping bags with no other sheets or bedding in the sheet is absolutely how I would have a baby. I mean, look, when they're first brand new and you bring them home and they want to swaddle, that is fine. But as soon as they are able to get out of a swaddle, you'd want them in a sleeping bag without sheets or any soft bedding in there. You always want to pop a baby on their back to go to sleep. Okay, so I know once babies can roll, some of them do prefer to roll onto their belly and sleep sort of face down, and they would often put their head to the side so they can clear their own airway. I know a lot of families, and look, I'm not, full disclosure, I was nervous about it myself when my bub first started rolling and then couldn't figure out how to roll back. So I'd be up overnight rolling her back, but you can't do that. It's not sustainable. And by the time they can roll, they can often turn their head as well and clear their airway, but you would still always pop them down on their back to go to sleep. And then they will find a natural position that works for them. If you are, so the other thing is smoke free. Okay, so you really want to make sure that, so there is good evidence to show that smoking and smoke particles in the household are not ideal for a baby for many, many reasons, but it is also correlated with early infant death. And then, so the other thing is the recommendation would be to keep a bub in the family or the parent room for the first 6 months. And that's, look, I know that there's varying practices in that. Some families like to get the babies out by 3 months. Some families keep babies in there for 2 years. And this goes back to me saying that there are recommendations and then there's what works for you as a family. But in general, those first 6 months are probably their most vulnerable. So we would prefer to have them in a family room, saying that, if there's a really noisy baby who you can't get any sleep, because we know at 4 months they turn into pterodactyls. None of this is wrong, but ideally we'd have a baby inside the family room for the first 6 months. And then the final recommendation would be that we would breastfeed babies for many reasons. There's so many reasons for where we should be breastfeeding babies. But I just wanted to make a point that also, if you can't breastfeed or it doesn't work for you, that doesn't mean that your baby is at higher risk, but it is just generally a recommendation for safe sleeping. One thing that I will just touch on is co-sleeping, because I know that there's a lot out there about co-sleeping, and I know, co-sleeping was big back in the days, and then we sort of went through this phase of absolutely no co-sleeping, huge risk to babies, and then now we're sort of going back the other way. I think this is a tricky one. I was absolutely terrified to co-sleep initially, but I now have 3 kids in my room every single night. So, I think the co-sleeping story, and are you happy if we chat about it?
Yeah, of course.
I think it is a big one. In general, there's a risk of co-sleeping is that if a baby's tiny and you've got an adult there and they're asleep, they can roll onto the baby. And unfortunately, this happens. Okay, we see it in hospitals, we see it at homes. Families do that can happen. In general, it's so more drug and alcohol affected parents that you're worried about, because they're the ones that have sort of lost their inhibition a bit when they're rolling over. It's when there's lots of bedding in the bed as well. So you can't put a blanket over yourself if you've got a baby in the middle. Like, that's just a no-no. But there are safer ways to co-sleep. There are co-sleeping bassinets. If you're able to sleep without any bedding on you, and making sure that you are not drug or alcohol affected, if co-sleeping is the only way that you're going to get sleep, if you can do it safely, then it is okay. And the Red Nose website actually has some information on how to co-sleep safely. So I just wanted to put it out there. I know a lot of people think that doctors and pediatricians are very against co-sleeping. I think that is changing, and as a parent now, I can absolutely see why you would do it. We just want to make sure we're doing it safely, because these risks of the bedding and sleeping on their back and the sheets, all of that is the same if they're in your bed or in their own bed. So just making sure that you're being really aware of that.
Yeah, certainly. And as you mentioned before as well, Red Nose on their website have a lot of kind of advice around this, which is really important. Advice around all different setups at home and, all different like family circumstances, because as you mentioned a few times, there is like every family is different. Every household's different. It might be your first baby, maybe there's other kids in the house. Like it is all context, your own context, and building a safe sleeping environment that makes sense for your household and your situation. I do want to ask about resources in this entire space. As we've said, the website is there, of course, for a lot. And then you mentioned also getting in touch with your maternal health nurse. Do you have any other advice on resources that we could be kind of leaning in on for some information? Noting that, of course, Googling things can end up in quite a toxic spiral for many of us parents.
Yes, absolutely. So look, your local Department of Health websites should have all of the maternal child health nurse visits, what they look for, all the developmental milestones. So they're all evidence-based. They're all backed by as well medical staff that sort of write that. Red Nose website, fantastic for sleep and safety, including things like car safety. Can I have a cot bumper in my cot? Please don't have a cot bumper in your cot. Stuff like that. The Raising Children's Network is fantastic. So if anyone jumps on that, it's got from birth up to teenagers and literally everything: sleep, settling, development, safety. How do you deal with an anxious teenager? There's a lot on there. So Raising Children Network is fantastic. The Royal Children's Hospital website have a lot of key health information fact sheets for parents. So if you're worried about things like viruses or gastros or the more medical stuff, there's really good evidence-based fact sheets written by pediatricians, written by researchers. So they're probably my big go-tos. I will do a little plug for allergy and food introduction, because that is my jam. Preventallergies.org, or Nip the Allergies in the Bub, is a fantastic website for introducing allergens into babies. And you do talk a lot about that with your maternal child health nurse in the first 6 months, because introducing foods is a big deal towards the end of that period. So they're probably my big go-to websites. I'd just be wary of Facebook groups and influencers and people trying to sell you homeopathic medications and vitamins and minerals and things, because it's just I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but I think you just have to be really cautious of when you're sleep deprived and you're desperate and you want an answer. You will find an answer on Google, but you just have to be really careful about spiraling.
But then I guess as well, that's, like pop it on the list. And then once you get to one of these appointments, you can ask the question, you can show them a product, this is why these appointments are really important, because then you can kind of get that answer from the medical side of things as to like, is this something that I could try? What do you think about this product? Like have those open and honest conversations. Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Doctor. It's been really, really nice to touch base on all of this. As we said at the start of the episode, this is a really anxious time for parents. It is super stressful trying to get your head around everything from milestones to safe sleeping to GP appointments to vaccinations. What happens? Why is there a fever 3 days after the vaccination? There's so many questions that we end up, going through. And it's such a timely episode with Red Nose Day this week on August 28th. You can, of course, help Red Nose Australia to continue to save little lives, such an important mission, by buying a Red Nose via rednoseday.org.au. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.